to please begin the session.
A very good evening to everybody. Thank you, Dr. Kalyani, my own Kallu, for your wonderful words. It was very kind of you to have said so many good things about me. Now I'm just wondering if, like, how I'm really going to, like, put it across, word exactly, how exactly. Uh, I mean, I cannot say what art is. None of us can. But there are various ways and methods of looking at it, and how do we go about it? I will try to speak from my own personal experiences, and I'll try to talk about margins, from, you know, by fathoming and looking at analyzing women artists, and then we'll go on, and we'll take a look at the COVID art scenario as well. Now, maybe I want you to, like, I just have one objective in this lecture, is, like, of course, by introducing, if not introducing, reintroducing, uh, you know, some artists to you and some artwork to you. I would like you to look at art in a very different manner, a different perspective altogether, because basically, especially during the COVID times, uh, a very significant, very significant movement has begun in our art, and art has actually started speaking from the margins. Till some kind of a time just previous to the COVID time, like from the Victorian times till 2019, I would say, or 2018, art had been a kind of a place where, um, like, a place where people with privilege and elitist art and had a lot of influence. Uh, the entire art scenario had been like run by art galleries. We had a lot of middlemen in between, and art galleries like Sotheby's and Christie's and Phillips, China Garden. There are 4 or 5 art galleries which in fact monopolize the entire art scenario, and they decided what to sell and what not to. This will be a big surprise to you, because during the time of Vincent van Gogh and other painters, I'll be actually talking about paintings, and then I'll dovetail into uh, the art scenario now during the COVID times, where murals and frescoes and recycling art and installations and photography, everything has actually become so popular, and everything has actually become so democratized during the COVID time. So I don't want to give away the suspense. But then these art galleries like Sotheby's and Phillips and poly auction centers, they had a monopoly. Actually, there was a duopoly amongst Christie's and Sotheby's. They were the ones who decided who should be canonized, which artist should be canonized, which artist or which artwork had to be auctioned, and what is the price of the auctioning, etc. So there was this huge industry, and this particular industry was a kind of an art market, which was like the broking center, like what we have Nasdaq and NSE and all. People were actually bidding for art, and suddenly certain artistic pieces gained a lot of popularity and importance, and everybody, I mean, especially the rich people, wanted it. So this was a scenario till now. And of course, with the periphery, you had a lot of other artists working against this kind of monopoly. In Kerala, we have our own monopoly. There is, in the Cochin Biennale, you can see the kind of monopoly. Almost all the art galleries, you can go and see certain artists are canonized, and like, unlike many literary people, the canonized artists are dead artists basically. During their lifetime, very few artists are regaled. And of course, people like Ravi Verma and all, who were actually born with a lot of privilege, had a lot of weightage in them, and they were, canonized right from the time they were born, perhaps. I have nothing against it. But my personal travails, in fact, or my personal acquaintance with cultural studies came in a horrible class in 1998. I was actually sitting in a dreaded teacher's class who, in fact, taught us this particular essay on ideology. Actually, who was the one who wrote the ideology essay? Althusser's sir's ideology essay. So I was fresh from Trivandrum and I was in Delhi. Um, and I was trying to like make heads and tails of what exactly ideology is. And this teacher was a horror. In the first class, I didn't have my textbook, and she asked me to go out. She said she's not running a kitty party there, and I just walked. This is my first class in Delhi, and she asked me to walk out of the class. And second class, I was trying to avoid her eye contact because she used to ask horrible questions. And if you answer the questions right, there were no right answers. If you answer the question, then she'd humiliate you. And as a fresh Mallu from Trivandrum, it was so difficult for me. And I used to camouflage myself behind others and sit behind others and try not to answer classes and all. So all those tales about brilliance and all in class that Kalyani told you were absolutely wrong. Okay, because as a new research students, all of us, in fact, get into research with a lot of apprehension, especially if there are teachers who talk to you in theoretical terms in a very intimidating manner. It becomes intimidating, in fact.
Babi,
And then,
Babi, can I interrupt you?
yeah,
Since you chose to contradict me, let me interrupt you. Many
oh, God.
participants are saying there is some disturbance, probably your fan or something, which is not
My
enabled.
fan is it makes a lot of noise. Can I
Is
switch
there
it
any
off?
solution to it?
Yeah, I can always switch it off. But
But
then you'll
will
see
it be
me.
too warm for you?
No, not at all. It will be warm for me, but it's okay.
Oh,
No
I'm so
problem.
sorry.
No problem. I switched it off. Are you okay with it now? Am I clearer now?
Of course,
Uh,
certainly you are.
yeah. So this teacher, the second class, soon after I was asked to go out, she asked me the meaning of ideology. And it was a dense French text. I'm sure a lot of you have read it or tried to understand it. For me, even now, it's a difficult text. So then I tried to answer her, saying that ideology is this, that, and she put me down. Then she said, "Give me an example." Then suddenly, I don't know from where, I said, "See, Raja Ravi Verma's paintings have a kind of ideology which has national." I don't know why I said it. I did not speak out of my scholarship or my sincerity, but I thought, she was a Haryanvi teacher, a Jat teacher. So in fact, if I could like put something Mallu, I thought I can escape. But then it was very well taken, and she said, "Oh, that's wonderful." And and then she tried to. She knew Ravi Verma much better than me, okay. And of course, she tried to help us out with the. So that kind of a horror, teacher, it turned out to be my kind of first guide towards research. And of course, I didn't make her my guide because I was too afraid of her. There, I began my first explorations of paintings. I started working on Ravi Verma for my MPhil. I began it as a child's play because I got a lot of encouragement from my teacher. But thereon, my entire approach towards painting, um, it just uh, became so different. And of course, while I was working on Ravi Verma, I was less political. And of course, I always saw the nationalism and subversion and kind of resistance towards nationalism. But then, while I was working on him, I could also see that I had interviewed quite a lot of people. I could see that he had a sister, Mangala Bai Tambrati. Of course, she also had the privilege of learning painting those days. Not many women in Kerala would have had that kind of privilege, except mural artists, and if there were any. But we do not know the names of many of these people. And then I came to know that most of the background and the landscapes of Ravi Verma's paintings were painted by Mangalabai. Um, and of course, a couple of paintings, Mangalabai's paintings are still extant, and some other paintings which are extant are in private galleries. I tried to get them, but many of them were not accessible for researchers because the family did not want to expose them all. I wonder why. Okay, maybe they were scared of burglars, but I thought it was a grave injustice made to a woman painter, who was not at all popular, not much popular, not as popular as Ravi Verma. And most of his landscape and all the finer details in his canvas were painted by Mangala Bhai. That's what they did. So now I want to ask you certain questions. Do you like art? Do you know any women artists? Mangala Bhai, of course, I talked about you. Do you know any women artists or transgender artists? Who are the artists? Do you know? Of course, there are 90 of you here, or 89 or 85 of you here listening to me. I cannot ask all of you. Maybe in the chat, perhaps you can, answer. There's no answer, like you can mm, put up the names. And how many Indian women do you know? And how many women and transgenders? So these are pertinent questions that we have to, in fact, ask. And have you ever taken a look at women or transgender artists, trans artists? Now, do you know any sample of the artists who are practicing their art right now? We are not talking about Da Vinci. We are not talking about Michelangelo. We're not talking about Vincent van Gogh. We are talking about contemporary people. So now, with these questions, I wouldn't want to wait for you to answer. If you can answer all these questions, then definitely, you're pretty well informed in art, and you have a kind of research interest in art. For others, I would like you to take a look at art from a very different perspective altogether. Um, I want to introduce this lady called Artemisia Gentileschi. She almost during the time of Shakespeare, she was there. She's younger than Shakespeare, 1563 to 1653. She had a long life. I mean, quite a long life. And my math is quite bad. If I say long life and all, please recheck, because sometimes it's not real calculation, it's just by intuition. So when I saw the figures, I thought perhaps she has a long life. So pardon me if I'm wrong. There is this man called Roberto Longhi. What he spoke about, what he said about Gentilici was the fact that she's the only woman in Italy who ever knew about painting color, impasto, and other essentials. And that was so condescending and patronizing a kind of remark. But that's all what we know about her in 1916, because you had stalwarts and cannons, like Boccaccio and Da Vinci, of course, the most acclaimed painter that the world knows, and everybody knows Da Vinci. Even my students, who are science students, know about Da Vinci because Dan Brown has popularized him much more. And then, of course, Michelangelo and all those painters, and all the world knew. And we Malayalis, we know Ravi Verma. And if there's a beautiful woman, we always refer that woman as Ravi Verma's muse, and all kinds of stuff, right? So this man, well, of course, talked about Artemisia. And of course, in 1970s and 80s, the feminist scholarship had unearthed her. In fact, studied about her in much more detail. And of course, they've come up with, Artemisia was also from the privileged class, because her family was uh, full of artists, her brother and her father and her cousins. And she became successful, a professional, later in her life, because there was a trial and there were these paintings, uh, which she painted so boldly. And then she also received commissions from many kings of France and Spain and England. And of course, she received the patronage of the Medici family. The Medici family, as you know, were the 12th century bankers who were there, who dominated the financial trade scenario of Italy, especially Milan, Florence, and other small princely states, Naples, etc., for a long period of time, for centuries. In fact, they were the first bankers in the world. So, and they were very fond of patronizing. So she got all those kinds of patronage. And her father, Orazio was a painter too. And she lost her mother when she was 12, and she started painting. Her father started, to teach her lessons and all. And then, at the age of 15 onwards, she started showing some kind of exceptional skill, especially in painting nudes without much inhibition. See, painting nudes, the nudes have a history altogether. See, this is how you go into cultural studies. When you actually talk about Artemisia painting nudes, then we have to look at the history of nudes were painted, of course. In India we have an entire history of especially the ancient history of nudity, sexuality and sensuality. Now we do wrap everything up in the kind of sugar coating of spirituality. Of course, sex was also spiritual, perhaps at that time. Maybe there was not this kind of a duality present. But then in Europe, nudity was perceived in a very different fashion. The first people who ever dared to experiment with nudity were the Greeks. In 1982, there was this I forgot his name. Okay, thanks to my memory, I cannot tell you many of the names. And there was this scientist who found some bronzes under the sea. These bronzes were called the Rianche bronzes. And once these bronzes were in fact dug out from the sea, they were taken out of the sea, the entire world was shocked, because the Rianche bronzes were the bronzes of male nudes. And these male nudes were very athletic in nature, the military in nature, and they had this kind of a perfect idealized human body, male body as such. And this male body, you won't believe it, our entire concept of six-pack came from, actually it was in 1972 this was discovered. In 82 this was displayed to the world. So our entire concept of six-packs and all, I know Kalyani and all, and I, when we were growing up as children, we did not have any idea of what exactly six-pack was. Only later in 90s the six-pack ideas came. But when you look into the history of it, Rianche bronzes, if you can ever take a look at uh, some kind of video, YouTube video, you should take a look at the video, because they are spectacular, because there's hyper realism in it. There's an exaggeration of realism in those Greek sculptures, and these sculptures were sculpted around. These were not paintings, were sculptures sculpted in 5000 BC, 5000 BC to 3000 BC. That's such kind of time period, which was supposed to be the golden period of Greek civilization. And Rianche bronzes had this male body carved and sculpted and chiseled to perfection. So you had every vein intact, had every muscle, tautly put inside, tautly packed together. And you also have something that is exciting, the posture of the entire thing, which is called the contra posture. That is a contrary posture. There is, you can see it in, if there are dancers, you'll understand what I'm saying. You have the dvibhangi and the tribhangi, right? The body can be, stylized in such a way that you have 3 or 4 contouring of the body. Dvibhangi is the dual contouring of the body. Your torso will be in one place and your hips will be in other place. And tribhangi is like your head and eyes in one place, torso in one place, and your hips in another, and limbs another. So this kind of a contra posture, and it's very difficult to, unless you're really, really athletic, it's so difficult for ordinary human beings to achieve that kind of contra posture. Now, so this was it. Like, yeah, somebody raised the hand, but I have a lot of things to say. So can we make the discussion towards the end of it? Or else, I'll miss out on things. Now, those were the first news.
At the end, Babi.
Yeah. So that was, those were the first news.
Stay put, everyone. She'll be back. Must be a power failure or something. Welcome back.
Sorry. I have this trouble in the evenings. Okay, so I'm both on Wi-Fi and hotspot. If one thing doesn't work, the other thing will definitely work. Thank you for your patience. So the Romans were like okay with all the bodily flaws, but
Please
still,
share your screen.
pardon.
Please share your screen.
Oh, sorry, I forgot about it.
Sorry.
So um, and then but still there are no female nudes. Okay, I mean a couple of female nudes are there. There's a young girl from Dora or something, a couple of female nudes. I mean a lot of things are actually lost, so but still male nudes were the kind of were in fashion. Can you really believe it? Now, then what happened? Consequently, with it, you had the Christian era. I would say the medieval times. With the fall of Rome, a new kind of new art forms took place because a new religion was becoming famous. In the beginning, it was a persecuted religion, but then later, out of persecution, maybe thanks to a lot of martyrs, became very popular. And then, during the Christian times, what happened was that in the Bible, it's actually forbidden to talk about to represent human bodies. But then the Roman art and the Greek art were so famous that there had been some ways to, in fact, propagate art. So everything became abstract, symbolic. Christ was a fish, and there was these crosses, and there were these thorns and things like that. And the kind of direct representation of human body was not really encouraged, not really done, because most of Christianity, especially the conversion to Christianity, happened in tombs. Those catacombs, those rolled up tombs, burial grounds, and they had done it all in very insidiously, in a very hidden fashion. And of course, they did not want this to be out. So lots of symbolism and abstraction crept into, and and of course, there is also the sinful element of not representing God's of body as such. But bodies were represented in Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve were basically nude people, but nudity was shame then. Suddenly Christianity had another interpretation of nudity altogether. This was not the site of pleasure or sensuality, but then it was a site of guilt. It was a site of shame. All right, and then only in the Renaissance, all these people, all these Italians started relearning the classics, and they revived nudes, and of course, more than male nudes, there are a couple of Davids by one David by Michelangelo's David's there. There's a sculpture, and there's one more David, famous David. I forgot. Like much before Michelangelo, uh, uh, it was sculpted. So a couple of Davids and all there, but female nudes became so popular. Massachusetts. Who was the one who painted the Birth of Venus? The Birth of Venus is supposed to be the first nude painting in the Renaissance era. I forgot the painter. Sorry. Please do check up. Whenever I have these memory lapses, if you're interested, you can definitely get back to them. Now, and here is this woman, in fact, painting nudes. And you have more nudes coming up. You have the Cleopatra's nudes and stuff like that. And this was difficult because, well, first of all, women were taught painting only in the closed arenas of their homes. And two, fathers, brothers, husbands, they were the ones who actually taught these women. Of course, for Artemisia, there was a tutor also. We'll talk about them later. And then what happened was that um, um, now many of the women, like Mangala Bhai and all, many of the women did the background work, the boring work, right? Etching out trees and the foliage and flowers and stuff like that in the background. The main figures were in fact painted by fathers, brothers and all, but this woman's like was bold enough to in fact, and she was precocious in fact, from a very young age she started painting. And this is one of those paintings which is like very very symbolic in many ways. This is a kind of biblical story of Susanna and the elders, 1610. This girl was hardly 18 years old, or 15 to 18 years old at that time. Again, I checked my math, but I know she was very young. And then there are these elders who take this is a biblical story. She paints a lot of biblical stories. She had painted a lot of biblical stories. And there are these two elder people, taking a look at Susanna taking bath. And Susanna is like not very happy about it. She's distressed. She's perhaps annoyed, and she's defensive about the entire thing. And of course, these elders really spread a lot of rumors about Susanna. And later, Susanna is found to be innocent. So you can see again so much of this woman was in fact painting the nude female body. And another point to be noted was that noted was the fact that in 16th and 17th century till 19th 20th century, women were also not given a glimpse of nudity in art schools. Art schools began 18th century in Europe, but even otherwise, they were not given an access to places, public places where they could in fact copy bodies or anything like that. So there were a lot of taboos against women, especially working on explicit things. And Artemisia was quite bold enough. Of course, she had the privilege of her uh, brothers and father, and of course, fame also. She was becoming popular because of her talent, and of course, privilege too. But then something happened when she was hardly 18 years old. She had this master, this artist called um, Tassi, Agostino Tassi, who raped her, and she was quite distressed about it. And after 9 months after she was raped, she reported it. Actually, she was working on a mural, a fresco with Tassi, and she reported the rape. And she reported the rape. Like nowadays, Europe was like present India in many ways. It was actually, Artemisia was actually put on trial because they wanted to find out if she was telling the truth, and they used thumb screws, they try to pluck out her nails, etc., and then to bring out the kind of truth. They thought under torture, truth will come out. Of course, Artemisia stood by her charges, okay, by the rape charges. Now, this particular rape, Tasso was put in jail for a year. Thankfully, Cassie, he was put in jail for a year, and that was a big thing those days. Okay, otherwise he would never have been implicated at all. Now, many people think that it's the rape that changed Artemisia's visual language, her painting techniques as such. Now, her works were then afterwards a continuation of the Caravaggio movement, and they also try to bring in a lot of gender complexities. So when you look at her paintings, it's not very easy for us to in fact understand if it's a female painting or a transgender painting or a man painting, but the techniques, but the context definitely, there'll be a lot of gender written into paintings as such. And Artemisia was quite smart at bringing it out. So this is one of those first paintings, like her early paintings, where Artemisia's like her Cleopatra, her nude. Um, I mean, after her death, have her relaxed death posture. And now this is one of her most famous paintings, she had painted twice. And this is Artemisia's Judith and Holofernes. Holofernes' story, all of you know, he was a king who invaded Judith's place and he raped Judith. And at night, what happens is that Judith uh, kills Holofernes, severs his head, and both Judith and her maidservants, they take his head out, severed head out. And but then this particular painting is famous for the fact that there's so much of violence and revenge which is actually written into it. Okay, and she was also repainting Caravaggio's version. A lot of people have painted um, uh, Judith, but not with so much of revenge in it. There's so much of struggle in it, so much of anger in it. There's so much of violence in it, and this is where her gender in this particular paintings become prominent and it becomes pertinent for us. So this is one of the most violent image of the Judith story, and every time I look at it, I get some kind of a pleasure to looking at it, because in the 17th century, they were she didn't even become subversive. It was a kind of an open statement um, uh, of revenge. And this is her. She had also painted a lot of self-portraits. I'm just going fast here because self-portraits again she has that kind of defined look. Okay, usually when paint a lot of self-portraits, except people like Frida Kahlo. Most of the women, when they paint portraits, self-portraits especially, they look away, they look into the mirror, or they look into the canvas painting it. But then, yeah, here you can see, like in Frida Kahlo, Artemisia Gentilis looks at you with a lot of defiance right on your face, so daring you, dare try to suppress me, and you get it back with my painting. So she had actually painted it with her first child, and there's more to it. Like we can actually write one thesis on every painting of hers, because you have the color contrast. In different periods, there's a muted color out here. It's a darker tone, and here you have a more of a vibrant tone. Strong colors are there: blue, yellow, red. The primary colors are there, and she has also used something called chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro, it was a technique where the contrast of light and darkness were used. So the light falls directly on the object, and the entire background is quite dark, so that the subject becomes quite prominent, and the contrast also becomes very prominent. So she had used these techniques. Of course, she was not the kind of inventor of chiaroscuro. You had Da Vinci and all using it, much before. Um, and here you have the second time Holofernes is painted, and this time it's like more brutal, and like Artemisia, not Artemisia, sorry, Judith is wearing a brighter color, and the Artemisia was also a painter of drapery. You look at the drapery, the folds, the colors, the folds, the kind of concentration, the disgust, and the kind of determination that's on her face. So these are the contrast, the two Judiths here. This is an older version. It's a young. I mean, this is the first version, the second version, and here you have a younger Judith, and here you have an older Judith. So you can see a kind of self-reflexivity. And on this particular painting, on the second painting, you can see that there are so many blood drops. Okay, on her breasts and her dress, it seems have drops of blood. So there's more violence to it. It's more gory than the first one. So I'm going through this, and you still have more paintings of biblical heroine here, and you have the second painting of you see this is like Susanna's painting. This passiveness is quite unusual. Maybe it was one of those phases of her life. Yeah, this is again another version of Judith, where Judith and a maidservant, they're hand in glove, the two women, conspiring against the wrongdoer and just eradicating him altogether. All right, and they're hand in glove and they conspire, and there's a kind of a strange friendship that's besides class, but it's a kind of a gender kind of friendship, which is complicit in its revenge. All right. Um, and this is a satire, Corsica satire story. I do not know much about this, okay, but then I wanted you to see the contrast here. This is the Susanna and the eldest story again. Defensively, Susanna has actually put her hands, and and she asked the elders to stop there. And the story of Lucretia, this is again important because Lucretia was raped. Lucretia was raped by an Etruscan prince, Etruscan king. And Lucretia, in fact, kills herself because her honor is violated, and but she asks her relatives to take revenge. So it's not the revenge of the woman, but then she makes sure that revenge is taken, and then she goes. So this kind of dominating rape theme, the dominating kind of violation themes are there. And Linda Nochlin, in a famous there's this famous essay by Linda Nochlin where she says, where have all the women artists gone? She is it Linda Nochlin? Yeah, she says that perhaps this is also a kind of patriarchal infringement into her artistic uh, freedom. Of course, there was physical violation, but there was a kind of psychological and mental violation as well. In almost all these paintings. So the Etruscan prince and his Moorish servants, again they're complicit in their male bonding of violation, and then they rape her. Of course, she takes revenge, if not directly. And again, you have the Judith and the maid servants. Yeah, very attention to details, her curly hair and her Moorish look, and her class, the difference in class. They're all actually packaged in chiaroscuro. Chiaroscuro spelling is there if you want to check and write down. This is a self portrait. So I'm just going slightly ahead in time. And then, of course, there were some other Renaissance painters also. A lot of paintings attributed to these women, but I'm not going into detail. But another painter, Mary Cassatt. Sorry, she was an American painter who painted from 1844 to 1926, and she was an impressionistic painter. I think you know what impressionism is. Till now, you saw smooth canvases, right? Everything was blended together and was so realistic. And here, you can actually see the brush strokes. So this small, rapid brush strokes, which are dominant in a painting, is what that makes impressionistic paintings impressionistic. So Claude Monet, and there were other painters who, in fact, even this thing, Vincent van Gogh to a certain extent, they were the ones who, in fact, dealt with impressionism. They never used black. For black, if they wanted to use black, you can see black pigments here, right? They used to mix brown and ultramarine blue, that made it black, or purple, brown, and purple, burnt umber, and ultramarine blue. So that mixture would bring black. So they never believed in using black. That was one of their mantras. Okay, and then you have these rapid brush strokes all around. I can actually see them so distinctly, and it became a kind of movement altogether. And here you have her daughter. Uh, Sorry, this is a self-portrait, and here you have her daughter, Cassette's daughter, relaxing uh, with a cat or a dog, not very sure. And you have a woman trying to stitch in her domestic duties in her garden. This is painted in a Japanese style because, during that time in the late 19th century, Oriental styles were becoming popular because Chinese and Japanese art, which are two-dimensional in nature, which had a clear outline. You can see the outline here, right? So even now you can see lots of Japanese paintings like that with a kind of floral backgrounds, etc. She was actually experimenting with them. And this is like the bath. Perhaps a child was given a bath by the servant or the mother. We do not, I am not very sure about it. This is an outing, summertime, it's an outing. And you can here again, you can see impressionistic marks out here of the waves, the ripples and the waves, etc. This is an outing, and there's this child in this lovely headgear and flowers and etc. Again, mother and child. What you can see, this is again a summertime this thing. Monet was a famous artist like Claude Monet, who in fact painted lilies, water lilies, with this almost the same. He was one of those innovators of Impressionism, with almost the same water strokes. In water, you have all kinds of colors. You have orange, you have purple, you have beige, you have yellow, all kinds of colors are there. Except black, they just used colors left, right, and center. And you have green, and you have blue. they have almost all the colors in water, and these colors were not really the bold colors. They were muted colors. They were they call it the cooler tones. Okay, the cooler tones um, of colors were used as well. Now, what was actually important out here was that a lot of domestic scenes were painted, and paintings from the real life experiences of the artist. And gender was sort of projected through the kind of close proximity with domesticity as such. Now, I would like to just skip Morisot, who's another painter, who painted for a brief while, around 40 years, 50, 45 years. Morissette, what's important was that, her life was like, she tried to live a very calm life, etc. But she was never given an opportunity to again, paint in public. She resisted, she questioned it, but then she was never given art classes. She was never, allowed to paint in museums or in those schools, artistic schools, which are male dominated basically. And then afterwards, you had the famous Georgia O'Keeffe. She was a very famous artist during her lifetime. But beginning, she had her own struggles. And again, she had a long life. Now I can see she lived for around 99 years. She had a long life. But in the beginning, her life was a struggle because people actually dissed her painting. She painted something like this. Like this. This American Southwest. This. Now people just wondered, what is this woman trying to say? What exactly it is? But then what it's only later, they understood that she was actually talking through very uh, very simple symbolisms. Okay, that she was actually talking about uh, flowers. She was talking through flowers. She was talking about flowers. She was talking about fruits. She was talking about the conch shell or a simple shell. So there was something they thought. The first of all, the critics, they started noticing her. They thought there's something really childish and very insignificant about her. But later, and of course, her flowers and apples and avocados and all, had all those curves and sensuality around it. So they also thought perhaps there's something more to it. And this particular bone-like structure that we have seen, that the skeleton of this rocks or something, the bones were in fact beautiful because it had their apertures and cavities, and of course, uh, a lot of roses were tucked inside, and it had all these impossible kind of simple symbolisms, and the color scheme was also monochromatic. Monochromatic means you use only 4 or 5 colors out here. You can actually see that have whites here. Okay, you can see creams and grays, and yeah, that's it, black. So almost the same tonal, there was this striking contrast as in, and of course, then, and she was known for this painting flowers. You can see this is iris. Then you have this blue morning glories, and she tried to give you a close-up of flowers. And these close-ups, in fact, give you a different perspective altogether. She'd force every viewer to look at the flower from a different point of view altogether. Suddenly, you'll be seeing the moon. We also have this flower, in our yards and things like that. But O'Keeffe gave us a very different perspective. The two ginseng weeds, and the striking poppies, oriental poppies, red poppy, Sakana, red Kana, 1928, and Jack and Pulpit. She painted 4 or 5 times. Purple petunia, calla lilies, and flowers, 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 flowers everywhere. And the first flower that you've seen is the black iris, was the most famous. Where is it? Let me show you that bit. Yes, this is a black iris. The most famous paintings, black iris. Why was this woman, painting silly flowers all the time? Now, she had an affair with an artist, Steigler or somebody, who cheated her a couple of times, but they were together for a long time. Steigler was a famous uh, painter, so he started patronizing her in the beginning. All right, and then later she got her own name, and later, now now a lot of studies have been there in analyzing these paintings, and they say that these flowers are just not flowers. They're perhaps women, they're perhaps vaginas, sexual organs. Black iris definitely is different kinds of vaginas, different kinds of reproductive organs, and the celebration of it perhaps. It's a kind of an implicit celebration of female fertility. So there are so many theories to it. There's a kind of defiance in that also. You see, you don't paint the vagina directly, but you paint the sexual reproductive part of a plant and you celebrate it. So that is a subversion that you can actually find in Georgia O'Keeffe. And now she's so famous. But in the beginning, she had faced a lot of criticism and people were dissing her. They thought it's insignificant. And Frida Kahlo, all of you know, because of the Mexican exotic self-portraits that she had painted for herself. As you know, she was married to Rivera, Diego Rivera, who was also another famous artist. Now, and her paintings of her self portraits as well as her portraits of Diego Rivera are very famous because she paints Rivera as she sees him. For her paintings were kind of personal political statements on the institutions of marriage, on the institution, on fidelity, on artistic popularity, on artistic freedom, etc. So here you can see this vintage eyes of um, Dago, which was actually highlighted because there's a lot of criticism out here. Okay, you can see that he's not looking at her directly; he's looking away, and there's something that he's hiding. There's something that and he also doesn't have a very pleasing face. He's like he's hiding something, or he's disgusted with something, or he's not very happy about what is going or on him being under the gaze of this lady. So these are their portraits. Again, the portrait comes as a wedding. This is a wedding portrait, and you can see this is the difference between these two artists. All right, you have Rivera, who's a huge, staunch man, and he holds the easel and brushes. She's just a coy, docile woman. She holds her shawl and she just lays her hands on his. They're not even holding each other, but it's a kind of an arrangement that they made. So this is painted 2 years after marriage. So in almost all Carlo's paintings, you can see heartbreaks and sadness and loneliness, and of course, plenty of honesty, and this anguish and joy and loss. And this is like soon after, as you know, Freda was also dogged by a lot of illnesses. She had mm, polio in the beginning, and then she had a spinal injury due to a bus accident, and she was laid up for a long time, and she painted a lot of paintings, laying on her bed, eating all her pain, etc. And this is like one of them. Like, she is the doe, she's a deer, like hunted down by a lot of arrows of the society. It can be an artistic arrow, the marriage, this thing, for physical illnesses or psychological bruises. So she just tried to put. They thought it was so eccentric. They did not understand why she was actually painting. And this particular painting, and in others also, you can clearly see a lot of animalism. Um, Animals are used as symbolism, and she becomes the animal, and animals are used as symbolism. So this is a very famous portrait here. My dress hangs here, and everything out here. See, I'm only talking about the painting inside, but while you look at the painting, you also have to look at the external kind of facts. What was the political situation, perhaps, of Mexico? I cannot go into all those details in depth, because I just wanted to give you a kind of feel of paintings. And even after hearing this, listening to this, a couple of you at least should go into painting, look at paintings in a very different manner altogether. And I'm sure you already know, but then let's go a little bit, a small trigger. There's this closet and there's this trophy. So and her life hangs in between the two. So it's a kind of shitty life, right? And how life is like hanging between the two. And there's a kind of black humor, and this will really interest the literature students here. There's plenty of black humor. It's like she's laughing at herself in her plight, and she's just exposing it to the world. And here she is, in the middle of ruins. Um, you have she must have had an abortion at that particular time because her spine was all crushed, and she was having a terrible, terrible time. And she's in between a lot of ruins, and she's looking at you. And that here I am, like a doll. I'm posturing right in front of you, but I have all kinds of ruins. You have, and there's also this clash of tradition and modernity out there. You have perhaps the birth of factories are there, the birth of machines and kind of industries are there, and then you have the ruins of an older world altogether on the one side. And here's the bride, and she's got a third eye, and the third eye is her husband. So there was a stormy relationship. So there were a lot of betrayals, and there was a lot of love, and of course there was also the feeling that Diego overshadowed Frida almost all his lifetime, and she knew her worth, she knew her talent, and but she felt entrapped. And this is a kind of wedding dress she's wearing with flowers and all, but it's like a nun's habit also, and you can see it's a kind of a web that entraps her. So this is her. She says exactly that. This is my thoughts about Diego. Here again, you have Diego sort of stamped on a forehead like a third eye. So, and another very important fact is that um, Freda never, for once, or maybe a couple of paintings, she envisages herself as purely feminine, but then there's always a kind of an ambiguous sexuality which is brought up in Freda's paintings. People have actually worked on it. She has a mustache, and she has eyebrows like joining together in the middle of a temple, and she in fact in many paintings you can actually see her as a dual nature. You have her heart, in fact, painted out, and you have this wild animal symbolism. Okay, these joining eyebrows and self portraits. In fact, she has painted around 55 self portraits, and she also has this thorny crown. For Christ, it was on his head. For her, it's on her neck. So it's kind of, perhaps it's a marriage, perhaps it's a gender, perhaps it's everything. And her mustache is like very prominent in almost all the paintings, and she's done it deliberately because she felt quite fluid about her sexuality, her body as such. Um, and this animal imagery and her oneness with nature were all quite prominent. This is soon after her spinal operation, and for everything. And here is her Pieta. She's like reworking on Pieta out here, and she's holding Rivera. But Rivera is not very happy about it. Neither is she happy about it. But then she has this feeling of protecting him, securing him to her bond. So there is this kind of paradoxical relationship, love hate, which was happening all the way. And sort of a disabled Frida painting again and again. Then Amrita Shergill is somebody who should take a look from the Indian scenario as well. So she was famous for her self-portraits and Hungarian portraits, and in the nationalistic period, um, uh, she got a lot of prominence because she, in fact, like Freda, she also weaved a lot of indigenous styles. For example, initially, she painted the Western way. You can see a lot of uh, impressionistic mark on her. But then later, you can see that she had adapted a lot of indigenous Indian styles into her paintings, and those became very famous. And here is Mangala Bhai, whom I was actually talking about. And her paintings, which are extant and which are available to us, is the Like this particular famous painting of Ravi Verma, which was actually painted by her, this Krishna, and there's another famous painting which I really like. It's very condescending, patronizing, but there's also something very naturalistic and realistic about it. And it's called Charity. And it's basically
Guys, sorry for the interruption. It was an amazing account of the history of art from the margins. I hope she'll be back soon.
sorry, I went offline again. So I'm sure there are private collections of lots of Mangalabai's paintings. I'm sure one day or the other they'll be accessible to the public. And I just want you to see
We
a
miss
few
your
more
PowerPoint.
Malayali. Oh, fine,
PowerPoint, I
fine.
mean screen.
PowerPoint. Sorry. Where is it? 1 second. Now we can see, right?
Yes, yes.
Um, then yeah, there are a few Malayali painters I would like you to introduce. I was searching for transgender painters in Kerala, artists in Kerala, but for body art, and don't have many transgender artists till now who've actually come to the mainstream. They still remain in the margins. But Ranjita, the makeup artist, she is like one of those artists who've actually come into the mainstream, especially in bridal makeup and body makeover, uh, which is considered to be art, for part of art. Sanjita Shankar is famous for her performance art. She has, in fact, made her own idiomatic impressions in the art scenario in the present world. It was very difficult for her because she also, in fact, suffered quite a lot of patriarchal setbacks. When she was painting and in the beginning of her career, she had a very difficult marriage, and she lost a lot of money, and it took a lot of time for her to, in fact, establish herself as a woman artist. So I had asked around many women artists, like, how is it like that in Kerala's art scenario, especially, and they say that it's like for a woman, it's absolutely very, very difficult. And now, thanks to Cochin Binale and all, a few women are accepted, and these women, as you can see, that they are basically academic artists, the ones who've actually gone to fine arts schools and who've learned the fine arts technically, and they had the degrees. Only then they're accepted into the artistic canon. They just cannot walk in due to their talent or anything like that. So even now, it's a difficult thing. So very recently, there was a big, huge controversy among the artists, women artists. Uh, like some artists were invited uh, to a camp. So a lot of camps happen, and camps are also places, where a lot of talent is exhibited. But these are also places that I have been told a lot of discrimination, sexual advances also happen. All right, a lot of favors are asked, and things like that. So, Rati Devi Panikkar. So the recent controversy was that the women artists were asked to attend a camp, and some of them, and they went there, they were asked to paint Savarkar, and a lot of them, just walked off from there, say that it's not possible. So now there is also, the equal kind of pressure from the right wing to assimilate artists into their fold as well. Of course, a lot of money is like thrown up around, but there's a lot of resistance to this kind of assimilation too. So Rati Devi Panikar is another painter who's based in Thrissur. Her paintings have a lot of different themes, but she's an animal lover, and there's plenty of animals, and there's plenty of animal love that you can see in her paintings. And so Shosha Joseph is another painter. In fact, she paints with muted colors. She's known all over the world, in fact. And this is a mean chatti. Um, it's different kinds of fish and different kinds of fish curries that women have to. So a lot of domestic life and domestic uh, representations of ancient. C.G.R. Krishnan, she took her degree in fine arts from the University of Hyderabad. She was my junior there. And I own a painting of CG. I didn't know that she's going to, we all knew that she's very talented, but now she's famous all over the world. She has taken residencies all over the world and she's painted extensively. And what's actually famous, she used to paint in natural, uh, you know, surfaces like handmade paper, and she used to paint people. What was so spectacular about her painting is that her paintings of her father, her mother passed away quite early, and her father was the one who brought all the kids up. And in all her father paintings, she has painted her father with breasts, and the two ripe fruit like breasts, where there is also the pain of breastfeeding, which is actually written into the cobweb. Now Siji is actually moved from this all watercolor, moved from watercolor to oil paintings. Jalaja is another remarkable painter, who in fact paints crowds. She's a crowd painter. She paints all kinds of crowds. She paints tourism into being, and she paints different kinds of people. And there's a tug of war between uh, people who really want to be photographed. This is the way people, in fact, pose for photographs. So again, there's this humor in her paintings. Now, quickly, if I'm given 10 minutes, Kalyani, do I have 10 minutes?
Sure, you can.
Okay. I don't want to bore you people because I don't want to give you an overdose of paintings. I just want to give you the in the right uh, amount. Now, there's something called pandemic art in the COVID times. Okay. What is so special about I really like this because it has actually disrupted the entire industry of art, and it has, in fact, throttled the art market. Okay. And I'm actually happy about it because auction houses were the power centers. As I've told you, the Sotheby's and Christie's, and they were the ones who chose artists. They were the ones who chose what kind of art had to be, in fact, sold. Now, pandemics, in fact, especially Zoom cultures, and Zoom, Google Meet, all kinds of platforms where the public could gather together and talk about different things, uh, disrupted the entire concept of middlemen in art. Now the artists, what happened is that, once upon a time when the artists wanted to, in fact, mediate with each other, they always had to have a middleman. So it's like Bose Krishnamachari would, no, I won't take names, somebody would introduce somebody. There are these heads, there are these canonical figures, basically men. For the Cochin Binale, you have people like Bose Krishnamachari and Rias Komu, and they're the ones who, in fact, make art. Okay, they're the ones who decide who ought to be exhibited and who shouldn't be exhibited. But now, what happened during the pandemic times is that thanks to Zoom and thanks to a lot of boredom, thanks to a lot of time in our hands, artists started making the coming up to mediate each other, and and platforms like Zoom and Meet, Google Meet, and Jitsu and all were so helpful. So they revolutionized art. Suddenly the middleman became of very little significance. The second part was that art galleries shut down. They shut down in real, but virtually they opened altogether. See, virtually, a lot of art galleries in France and in London, they opened the gates for the public, and they were quite astonished to see that. Till one point, when the real art galleries were in place, people used to visit. The people who used to visit art galleries were real connoisseurs, uh, tourists, or old people who were tourists and they had nothing to do. Or art lovers and critics and artists were also there. They belong to the connoisseur thing. Or some rich people, like collectors, and who really wanted to see art, who got a kick out of art. And now the virtual opening of art galleries, what happened was that it seems there was so much of a traffic, virtual traffic of youngsters, which was unprecedented. They never expected it. They never expected, young boys and girls and youngsters, rushing into the virtual galleries. And they were so interested in art. That was number two. Number three was that youngsters, housewives, people from the margins, people who were not so privileged to attend art classes and prestigious art institutions, they started attending classes on, again, places like Udemy and masterclass Udemy and Domestika. A lot of artistic platforms, I mean, study materials or consortiums started becoming so popular, and everybody was actually attending. I mean, whoever was interested was attending classes. Number four, you were sitting at home. People were in fact doing a lot of recycling. They were experimenting with a lot of domestic things. They were recycling and regenerating things, and they were transforming waste altogether. So there was also kind of an installation which was happening, in ordinary people. So the high canons of art, at least for a year, they'll go re-established because middlemen will have to live. Art will come back as a huge industry sooner or later. And but what happened was that the middlemen, art actually traveled, came home, and it started uh, affecting people, affecting household, youngsters, housewives, ordinary people, and everybody started um, experimenting with art. Art became so democratic. So I'll skip a few things out here. These are all history. If you want to go into COVID art, if you really like the topic, then definitely you have to speak about Piazza. You have to speak about Hans Holbein because they all are painted during pandemics, during the plague times. Hans Holbein, who painted his ambassadors, he died of plague. And then of course, you have to talk about Bruegel. I'm not going into all these things. Now, of course, here you have Edward Munch. He had Spanish flu. Of course, he recovered, but then not everyone was actually. This is Edward Scheil, his family. He, in fact, died of Spanish flu. And this is like you have a laboratory where there's a plague prevention program going on, and there's an AIDS patient. His final moments in photography. So pandemics, but during COVID times was revolutionary because it actually came out of the art galleries and it just became so resplendent in the streets. So you had it everywhere. And there was a kind of message in all kinds of art. It was instructive. It was pedagogic in nature. They were saying, okay, if you want to kiss, go ahead and love, but then wear your mask. And life also became like that. People, that kind of proximity, but the physical proximity was actually measured with care. And all kinds of, youngsters, children, everybody started making art and instructional art, which actually spoke about homes and domesticity for the long time, and then washing hands and viruses. And for the first time in history, I mean, maybe not for the first time, but in 20th century, we exactly knew what caused the virus. I think, except in India, the rest of the world had moved away from, because thanks to science, they had moved away from all those notions about God being furious and punishing us. During the Renaissance time, during the plague, the Black Death times of the Renaissance, it happened thrice. Europe was full of fear because they didn't know what was happening during the plague times, and they thought it was God's anger, God's wrath that is actually raining upon all human beings alike. Bruegel was one of those people who, in fact, painted that kind of God's wrath, devastating people. But we knew what was cause. Except for us, I think we, of course, clanged uh, not bottles, plates, and lit lamps. No, nothing wrong with lighting lamps. But then those kinds of stuff had actually become redundant in Europe and Africa and America and all. But Italy, of course, they lit lamps. But it was not to dispel the virus. They knew that cannot kill the virus. But here, a lot of people, they believe that the sounds and can actually become vibrations and kill viruses and things like that. People really gave a kind of pseudo scientific touch. That was the thing. There's nothing wrong in ringing the bell or lighting a lamp. It's all very auspicious and nice, positive. But then giving it a pseudo scientific touch was a bit dangerous. And I think Europe had actually given it up, maybe 200 years back. You know, and in
Yeah, we can see
Hello?
you, but no screen again.
Okay. Thanks for reminding. Because I can see the screen. I was under the. I mean, I just forgot about it. So all kinds of art was like being produced, and people were not embarrassed to have popular kitsch art projected. New York Times and a lot of well-known magazines. They even encouraged COVID art. Photography and COVID art exhibitions, and people. And this is this boy. Yeah, he in fact, adapted Ravi Verma's paintings, and he made it quite instructional and pedagogic in nature. Rahul B. Matthew. So there was plenty of activism also going on in art. So activism is the main key. There's another point that I really wanted to do. And this is a COVID mural in Hong Kong and street art. In fact, it produced a lot of carnivalesque. Yeah, he's a super woman out here. Suddenly super men and women. We had a different meaning altogether. We had the health workers who were the supermen and women. Um, and of course, there was a lot of political satire. Uh, Trump and the Chinese premier were made fun of left, right, and center. And here is Trump as the virus. Okay. And old paintings were readapted and given different meaning altogether, COVID meaning altogether. And somebody whom you should actually be on the watch out is Banksy. So Banksy is like nobody knows who it is. Okay, he is an artist in the UK. He's he's this thing um, street artist, and nobody knows who he is. He paints overnight and he leaves. The next day, you have a spectacle right in front of you. So this is Vermeer's girl with the diamond, with the pearl earring. So this is a girl with a mask. Vermeer's famous paintings, adaptations taken. So Banksy and his pals, though nobody knows him, but of course he has a middleman. He gets lots and lots of money. Now he is. His street art like displayed in almost all famous galleries, and he gets a lot of money for that. And here's this famous painting. Okay, he had also opened this Instagram account where anybody could in fact send in your COVID artwork, and that particular Instagram handle had millions and millions of followers, and people were all making art. They were all producing art like never before. It was a mass production. Suddenly they weren't very famous artists. Everybody was like capable of making art. So there was never such a democratizing kind of moment in artistic history. Now I'm so high about it. Of course, only when I analyze it a couple of years later, then I'll be able to see the undercurrents of it. But then, right from the margins, everybody was talking to the center, and the margins were becoming the center. And here you have Banksy's very famous painting, which was painted in the University Hospital, Southampton, one night. And here it is like it's called the superheroes. Suddenly, the superhero is not Superman, but a health worker. And he had also actually put all his super Batman and other superheroes in the garbage bin. So even a child, knew the importance of science, and everybody. If you look at pandemic arts in the Renaissance time, there was plenty of God. God was actually raining wrath from all sides, and it was punishing people left, right, and center. But here we knew we were all looking forward to the vaccine at that time, and they were laughing at political leaders who were stupid. We were also regaling the political leaders like the New Zealand prime minister and all for the kind of support that especially women leaders proved their mettle during this particular time. And here you are, and here you have the French kiss of the Chinese premier and the ex-American president. And there was this huge, fight for, during people hoarded toilet papers, and what really happened. So the Golem, the Lord of the Rings, you have the Golem holding rolls and rolls of toilet paper, and recycled art was there, recycled masks are there, and readaptation of Mona Lisa. The latest Mona Lisa that I have seen is that Mona Lisa is getting vaccinated. I couldn't get the picture. And you have, the creation behind it. And here in India also, they were having a gala time. Not the migrant laborers, but the artists. In fact, they were representing the plight of the migrant laborers at the time of COVID, where lots and lots of them, lakhs of them, had to vacate the city and they walked home. So, and I would also like to show Washington Post. They in fact advertise for COVID art, and they got it from all over the world, from Germany, England, Guatemala, all places. And people, in fact, chose all kinds of materials. They did not use paint alone. They used a lot of installations. They used oil. They used acrylic. They used watercolors. They used flowers. They used cinder blocks. They used dryers. They used sheet, hot glue, all kinds of stationery, all kinds of junk, all kinds of recyclable materials were used during COVID times. In India, economically, the artists, especially not very famous ones, had a very tough time. But I also know a couple of people who started taking classes over Zoom. And I know a special artist friend of mine who, in fact, became quite popular on Zoom as an art teacher. And he's now an established artist. Nowhere in the academic artistic world was he ever given entry. But then he established himself. He didn't want the help of any of those people during the COVID times. Okay. Here you can see some of the paintings. And in the Washington Post, it came the Washington Post, all kinds of people, they talked about lockdown, they talked about isolation, they talked about separation, they talked about, when they talked about separation, they also found that kind of proximity, closeness, suddenly, people were into each other. It seems, for the pandemic times, lockdown times opened a lot of opportunities. I know a lot of people who became pregnant during that time, cooped up at home, and that's wonderful. And I know a lot of people who had a lot of extramarital affairs and a lot of fun. It's like, so there was polyamory, there was armory, there was isolation, there was sadness, it was so mixed. So everything came together unexpectedly. And there was also a lot of financial constraint. Um, of course, knowledge capital helped, artistic knowledge capital or, academic knowledge capital helped a lot. People were teaching and taking lessons, etc. But then this was also some kind of an era, a period that the world had never, ever in this particular century witnessed. And of course, the artist definitely looked at it from a different point of view altogether. And everybody was into art. And here you have trash cans, and you're making an art out of trash cans. And of course, you know, the epidemic here, the pandemic times also gave us a taste of the margins, I would say. Gave us a taste of how mainstream arts world or the entire art industry and art market could be toppled in just one day. That is the day when the lockdown began. So thank you so much. It was pretty long, I know, and had lots of material. It's basically because I really get excited when I talk about art. So pardon me for this real long lecture. Uh, Now, if you have any questions or anything, I'll be very glad to. If I know, I'll be very glad to answer.
Thank you, Babi. It was a very exhaustive, physically exhaustive for you, I'm sure.
That's because I don't have the
Intellectually
time of
exhaustive for us.
it.
And completely,
Sorry for
no, it was
overloading
lovely.
it.
It was so comprehensive and absolutely brilliant. And because we are streaming live on YouTube, they can watch it again. And
Oh dear. If I wish, I know it didn't register, or else I would have been conscious of it.
it was beautiful.
Yes.
And before we start with the questions, there was a thought that was wrangling in my mind from the beginning when you asked about transgender activists. Obviously, most of us do not know any transgender, artist. Um, but I was thinking that the transgender people uh, break the boundaries of art, and they do a lot of they themselves are like art forms, like using their
Yes,
body as the
yes.
canvas.
Yeah,
I was
body art
thinking of,
is. Mm-hmm.
I was no, even just the way they dress up and
Yeah,
come out
yeah.
in the society. I was thinking of Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi as a case in point,
Yes, yes.
and
Mm.
so many
No,
of them.
but I made a huge mistake. Okay, during the COVID times, transgender art was also quite from the margins. It meant from everywhere. Only that, there are a couple of slides there of transgender artists, but not Indians. I'm sure Indian artistry, it's like they themselves become art, right? Uh, but then in this thing, in many of the platforms like Instagram and all, I have a friend too who in fact who is actually not a transgender, but like he's an activist, LGBT activist, and he himself did a lot of performance art, showcasing that light. So it became prominent during the COVID times, and it was out of my laziness. I did not in fact look at it, but surely it is definitely there. A couple of slides are also there, yeah, which I can send it to you if you want to take a look.
Yeah. So, participants, would you like to share some comments or views or ask her a few questions?
um, can I switch on the fan now if you don't
Oh,
mind?
sure, sure, sure. I'm so sorry. Yeah,
No
please.
problem. Okay. What do you think of the latest
Somebody is
development?
asking, Safat Ahsan is asking, what do you think of the latest developments in NFT art? People selling his art for millions of dollars through blockchain markets.
um, See, what the recent trends show us is that blockchain markets and internet markets and even art galleries, even places like Sotheby's and Christie's and all have actually suffered a kind of setback during this 1 year. Before it was quite prominent. Millions and millions of dollars were transacted, uh, art forms were really hyped. But then COVID art in fact changed the entire it was a kind of a paradigm shift that actually happened during this time. The entire lingo of artistic uh, transactions, art market as such, changed altogether. And this kind of digitalization of art also kind of democratized. It brought down the prices of art. And people started imitating left, right, and center. Adaptations started coming, and people didn't know where exactly the original is, or where exactly the duplicates are. Um, uh, so this kind of multiplicity or the dynamism of art, in fact, like especially Instagram has really popularized and made made artists of ordinary people, I would say. Okay, so this kind of the huge monetary deals in the art industry, at least for the time being, is a kind of break to it. I'm sure this is. I mean, there'll be newer ways to find out. This kind of transactions, millions of dollars, will be resumed sooner or later. But this was a major rupture in art market as such. So even not just people, even Banksy himself, though he's a street artist, he's a subversive artist. Nobody knows who exactly he is. Some people say he's black, some people say he's white. Nobody knows, but he also sells his art for huge amounts of money because, like, at that, to be an established artist, you have to actually sell in millions and millions of dollars. So Banksy also, even during the time of this blockchain market period, Banksy had, had subverted the entire thing when he had in fact at Lloyd's, I think, he at Lloyd's at Christie, uh, he uh, he displayed one of his paintings, and he said that this is the price. And of course, when you take the painting off, it will disintegrate. People really didn't know, believe in it. And there were a few takers for it. It was sold for millions and millions of dollars. The moment it was actually taken off the wall, the painting really disintegrated. So, uh, uh, so even during the time when art market was in fact flourishing, people like Banksy, a lot of street artists were also in fact uh, subverting the entire thing, questioning the kind of money that is involved by making art less and less valuable. Think that this is like one of my artist friends who said, artist, 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 nothing but part. So this kind of an irreverence definitely was there even during that time. But then during the COVID times, it became very, very prominent, and it'll take a while for the digital market and the art market to take over and run it in the older fashion.
It's fascinating, this transition from fine arts to public art, isn't it?
Yes, it is fascinating.
So many
And
people are
one more
already
thing
doing
is,
research on that, I'm sure.
I'm sure, and plenty of researchable material, because see, even if you look at your own friend circle, suddenly you have people recycling the bottles and making something new, or making culinary arts. So suddenly people found a lot of dynamism and possibility in art, and they knew that, and it's like just not meant for artistic gallery, because you have the digital platforms uh, which are stronger, which are more accessible to the public, to the entire world. Suddenly there were no boundaries of nations and places and spaces that were limiting them. So that kind of accessibility and that kind of publicity and democratization really helped a lot of artists. And especially for women, this had been particularly had been particularly kind of exciting a time, because I have seen bottle art. At least a lot of people were doing bottle art, and there were, when you research it, I'm sure you can find a lot of very unique trends out there.
Very true. You must be really exhausted. And are there any more questions? If not, we'll call it a day. This is on YouTube, so I'm sure thousands of people will be watching it very soon, and it's going to generate a lot of discussions and new ideas It's like a spark that we have given. So much research is possible in this area. I'm so glad that you gave us such an exhaustive, comprehensive presentation. Thank you so much, Babitha.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kalyani,
Yeah.
my own Kalyu, for giving me the opportunity. And I'm so glad. I've been actually talking about it for quite some time. I'm so glad to talk about it again. And, that actually made it quite exhaustive. But I'm sure, a lot of you will be looking at art, in a different manner altogether.
So this, for anybody who's new here today, this is conducted by the Cultural Studies Forum, which is an open platform just a few ordinary people have started. They are researchers interested in cultural studies. We will be organizing a lot of public lectures like this. And I hope all of you, including Babi, you would all support us and come together again for such interesting deliberations. So thank you very much. Hope to see you all
Thank you
again.
so much.
Thank you.